Welcome to our devotion for today. In our devotion yesterday, we looked at Daniel chapter 7 and we read the first 8 verses where we came across the 4 kingdoms of the world, starting with Babylon, coming to Medo-Persia, to Greece, and finally to Rome. It was interesting that the last kingdom, which is Rome, is called an undescribable beast. Let's visit again Daniel chapter 7, verses 7 and 8. And after this, that is after the 3rd kingdom, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue, and its feet, it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. We discussed yesterday about this Roman Empire, how long it ruled, and finally the 10 kingdoms that come in from Western Europe, and the 3 that were uprooted, and the little horn that came up. We ended there. And so today our interest is just to try and identify this 4th, this little horn that comes out where the 3 were uprooted. We are going to try and identify this by looking at its characteristics. What are the characteristics of this little horn? This power must have been this little horn. Looking at Daniel 7, verse 8, maybe let me read also verse 20, which says, and the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. This power must have been little at its rising, that is called a little horn, but grows to become great and formidable. This is something which is a cue for us. It started small, hence it's called a little horn. But it grows and becomes formidable. That is why eventually we are told it speaks pompous words, proud words. But what power is this little horn? Verse 7 and 8 of Daniel chapter 7, it came out of the 4th beast that we are sure of. What is that 4th beast? It's Rome. In its origin and in character, it is still the same as Rome, because it is part and parcel of the same beast. And verse 8, it came from among them. What is them? The 10 horns. The only power that arose gradually and which became great among the 10 Western European countries is the papacy. That is the only record we have. When you go and look at the Western European countries and say, in history, which power came up, and you will only come to an understanding that it is only the papacy. Well, verse 24 tells us that it arises after them. Once again, the 10 kingdoms. By AD 476, the 10 kingdoms were established in Western Europe. If the power represented by the little horn arises after them, then it must have become established after 476 AD. The papacy finally became well established, having an unchallenged power with the overthrow of the Astrogoths. Remember the 10 barbarian kingdoms that we mentioned. And when it finally overthrew the last one, which was the Astrogoths, it had absolute power by the year AD 538. So officially we can say the papal Rome, from pagan Rome. The takeover, the transition takes over, happens at AD 538 officially. It seems as if it's two different kingdoms, but according to Bible prophecies, the fourth kingdom and the last kingdom of the world, it just changes in phases. I hope that is clear and not confusing to you, my friends. And then verse 24 says, it shall be diverse from the first, shall be different from the first. The Western European kingdoms were political kingdoms, as you would check in history. The power under description, however, was supposed to be different from them. This power, or horn, the little horn, has eyes, which we don't hear about the other horns, has eyes like the eyes of a man. Verse 18. This is the symbol of, when we talk of eyes, it's a symbol of a seer, S-E-E-R, or a prophet. Thus, this power is religious, but becomes political. So it's religious in nature. It has got a religious aspect to it, and then it also has a political nature. So it's a religio-political kingdom. The only power that arose after the 10 kingdoms, historically, and which fits this description, is the papacy. So, verse 24 says, it shall subdue 3 kings. In order for the little horn to rise into prominence, 3 kingdoms had to be uprooted. Verse 8 that we read. These were the Heruli in 493 AD. Then there were the Vandals in 534 AD. And then there were the Ostrogoths in 538 AD, which was the final. That's when it had absolute power. Verse 25 of Daniel 7. It shall speak great words against the Most High. This is called blasphemy, simply put. And you can check that out in Luke chapter 5, verse 21, and Mark 2, verse 7. Who is the Most High? There's only one Most High, against God. And it's when it speaks pompous words or proud words, it's blasphemy against God. How so? Consider some of the pronouncements by the papacy itself. So we can only draw and come to a conclusion by what the papacy claims of itself as a religio-political kingdom. The Catholic National, July 1859, has this to say: the Pope is not only the representative of Christ, but he is Jesus Christ himself, hidden under the veil of flesh. Wow. I can say wow, because this is the pompous words we're talking about. Claiming to be Christ, to be the representative of Christ, the vicar of Christ. And precisely there, it says he is Jesus Christ himself. We know this not to be true. Lucius Ferraris, Prompta Bibliotheca, Papa, the Pope, Art 2, 1772 to 77. That's the years. Volume 6, page 26 says, hence the Pope is crowned with a triple crown, as King of heaven and of earth, and of the lower regions. You can understand what that means. King of earth, King of heaven. The pompous words. Dignity and duties of the priest of Silver by Saint Alphonsus de Ligori, page 27, says, with regard to the mystic body of Christ, that is, all the faithful, the priest has the power of the keys, or the power of delivering sinners from hell, of making them worthy of paradise, and of changing them from the slaves of Satan into the children of God. and God himself is obliged to abide by the judgment of his priests. This is straight from the Vatican, from the papacy itself. That's what it defines and as their responsibility. In verse 25, looking at that, it says, it shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Daniel 7, verse 25. It shall, this power, this little horn, it shall wear out the saints of the Most High. This characteristic also fits the papacy. For examples, Lorente, former secretary of the Inquisition, admits in the history of the Inquisition in Spain, 1827, page 593, that in Spain alone, more than 300,000 suffered persecution. Of those, 31,912 died in the flames. Throughout Europe, millions more were slain. Remember, verse 25 of Daniel chapter 7 said, this power shall wear out the saints of the Most High. And this is exactly what happened. They do not deny it, they also confirm it according to the books you can read for yourself. Hence, the Bible was written in a coded language for us to see and believe as we see these things happening before our very eyes. So you've got books written by the papacy, people from the papacy, who are confirming the very same facts. The history Lecky has stated the following, that the Church of Rome has shed more innocent blood than any other institution that has ever existed among mankind, and will be questioned by no Protestant who has a competent knowledge of history. That's W.E.H. Lecky. History of the Rise and Influence of the Spirit of Rationalism in Europe, 1910, Volume 2, page 32. Again, looking at chapter 8, verse 25 of Daniel, says, it rules for a time and times and the dividing of time. Depending on the version of the Bible you are reading, some versions will be very direct and clear. It rules for 1,260 years. Now, Revelation 12, 6 and 14 shows that times and dividing of times, or 3.5 years, calculates to 1,260 days, or 1,260 literal years. Ezekiel 4, 5 and 6, Numbers 14, 34. They do let us know there that a day in prophecy represents a year. And so when you look at 1,260 days, if your Bible says 1,000, it rules for 1,260 days, convert that to with the principle of a day represent a year. It simply means it ruled for 1,260 years. So consider the fact that we said from 538 AD, this kingdom, the Papal Rome kingdom, had absolute power. And then add 1,260 years. That culminates in 1798. That's where the 1,260 years comes to end. So the papacy ruled from 538 to 1798, which marks the 1,260 years. Now, verse 25 of chapter 9, Daniel, it shall think to change times and laws. This power, it shall seek to change times and laws. This characteristic also fits the papacy. The papacy has fixed loads of days. Examples that I can cite is it changed the Gregorian calendar. The fixing of the Easter date is by the papacy, and the fixing of or the setting of the date of Christmas. We know Christ was not that 25th of December. It's not a biblical date. but it was fixed by the Papa. So was the Easter. So was the Gregorian calendar changed. The most significant, however, of the changes, there are many we can mention, but the most significant one is the change of the Sabbath day from Saturday to Sunday, from the seventh day, according to creation, that God created in day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then on the seventh day, which is a Saturday, he rested. Now the papacy came and changed that date from the seventh day to a Sunday. And the claims are that it's because Christ rose on a Sunday. What does the Catholic Church say about this change from Saturday to Sunday? I would use this in a question format that I have prepared here. That was asked to them, and this was a question and answer format that was given to them. And I would like just to share from this question. Have you any other way of proving that the church has power to institute festivals of precept? And the answer was, had he, is talking about the church, had she not such power, she could not have done that in which all modern religions agree with her. She could not have substituted the observance of Sunday, the first day of the week, for the observance of Saturday, the seventh day, a change for which there is no scriptural authority. They are very clear on that. It's a change that they did with no scriptural authority. That is from Stephen Kiernan, A Doctrinal Catechism, the Obedience Due to the Church, chapter 2, page 174. The other question is, how, excuse me, how prove you that the church hath power to command feasts and holidays? Do they have power to do that? The answer is, by the very act of changing the Sabbath into Sunday, which Protestants allowed, and therefore they fondly contradict themselves by keeping Sunday strictly and breaking most of the other feasts commanded by the same church. Even the Sundays that are kept are not being adhered to according to the scriptures. It's amazing that there are many other groups or churches that actually keep Sunday, and yet they claim to be different from Rome, Papal Rome. Yet they are keeping what Rome instituted, and that is the gist of what I see as a response here. So the other questions are, how do you prove that? How do you prove what we have just said about our changing the date from a Saturday to a Sunday? The answer given was, because by keeping Sunday, they acknowledge the church's power. When you keep Sunday, you acknowledge the Catholic Church's power, Roman Catholic, to ordain feasts and to command them under sin, and by not keeping the rest by her command. They again deny, in fact, the same power. This is by Henry Tuberville, An Abridgment of the Christian Doctrine, page 58. You may read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. This is what they have to say. You may read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and you will not find a single line authorizing sanctification of Sunday. The scriptures enforce religious observance of Saturday, a day which we never sanctify. James Cardinal Gibbons, The Faith of Our Fathers, 1917, page 72 and 73. Another action of the Catholic Church which might be of interest is the omission of the second commandment from the list of the 10 commandments as it appears in their catechisms. To compensate for this deletion, the commandment is divided into two. They took out the second commandment and then they divide it into two to fill up and make it 10 still. Of changes and modification, you need to just double check what the catechism says versus what the 10 commandments say as written in the book of Exodus, chapter 20. you will see that difference clearly. Of changes and modification of God's laws, you may read this quotation from a Catholic writer who says, "The Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, explain, or interpret even divine laws. The Pope can modify divine law since his power is not of man, but of God, and he acts as a vicegerent of God upon earth." Wow. Lucius Ferraris, Prompta Bibliotheca, Art 2. The only power or institution that fulfills the composite of all the characteristics is the papacy. Revelation 14 verse 12 says, God expects his saints to love and be faithful to him. Here's the patience of the saints, those that have the faith of Jesus and keep the commandments of God. In these last days, he is calling all people to follow the word and commandments of God instead of human institutions. Will you be a saint of God? Because this is the call of God. I know for someone who may be a Catholic out there and listens to me and probably thinks this man must be waffling. What is he talking about? Check the scriptures for yourself. Take time to check your doctrines as written in your catechism and other books by your writers. You will find I'm not in any way attacking anyone. I'm simply using the information as written by the people who are part of the papacy about what they claim of themselves versus what the prophecy said. And that is where we come into fusion to understand that this is why in the book of Daniel, this beast is named or called an undescribable beast, because its modus operandi is there to confuse people. I would like to believe that there is no way that this power will come out into the open and say, we are the ones that fulfill the prophecy as written in Daniel chapter 7, 8, and 9. No way. They know what they are doing, I would like to believe. But my focus is not so much on them. My focus was mainly to try and look at the characteristics of the little horn that starts small and grows until it is a formidable power, and eventually it has pompous words, it wearies the saints of the Most High, it attacks God. There's a lot that we can share. If I were to do this study, it would take me a month if I were to go into detail. But I chose to look at the approach of a summary that helps us to understand. And that challenges you to go and read more so that you do not become a consumer. I'm just simply sharing an overview of the lesson. I pray that God will help you to understand as he's also helping me to understand. Have a wonderful day.